But it really, I mean, it is common sense. If it looks like a business, acts like a business, it's probably a business.
Temporary foreign worker, those foreign nationals on permits should not be allowed to get incorporated status. What is your thoughts on that?
Your recommendations that you had in the other report, did any of them focus on education and awareness of, that could be provided potentially to help new truck drivers?
I'm wondering if you could speak about to how Driver Inc. has affected cross-border trucking.
And if you have a minimal amount of training and a big rig, you're dangerous.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
And I just want to sort of walk through the distinction between an independent contractor and an employee, because I think there's been some I don't know if we've been the most clear in terms of explaining the difference. So when an individual or a corporation has, or I should say an individual, start with a person, they have the ability to decide whether they're going to be whether they're going to be an independent contractor or an employee. That being said, there are certain safeguards in place where the CRA or otherwise may deem a contract to either be that of an independent contractor or an employee, and that is completely valid and completely legal. And so the incorporation of an individual within the right circumstances to become a quote unquote business is completely legal and allowed. Where the concern starts for me, at least, is that people are being taken advantage of. Could you, Mr. Kotak, explain to me why an employer might want to use they're in a greater power position to encourage perhaps someone who's not as sophisticated to go ahead and incorporate as opposed to being an employee?
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence, for your question. There's multiple reasons. Obviously, I think the first one is around it's cheaper. It's definitely cheaper when it comes to taxes, CPP, EI, vacation pay, minimum wage laws, and providing benefits. It's estimated around 30% difference. So if you're an independent contractor, if you're a business, there's potentially a 30% savings there if you kind of go with the incorporation model. There's another component of this as well, and it deals, and this is some of the stuff that I've fortunately or unfortunately, depending on which way you look at this, had to deal with, and that is terminations when you're actually leaving employment. There's a lot of rules around termination, whether it's the Employment Standards Act or whatever. And I'm speaking, obviously, I'm a licensed lawyer in Ontario, so I understand it varies from province to province, but the basic is kind of the same. Is when you go and you circumvent the system, it's okay, we're going to terminate this contract. You're an independent contractor versus do you meet the threshold of having 25 plus employees, the $2.5 million payroll, where there may be additional money, severance potentially owed, common law notice periods. All those things kind of go out the window when it's an independent contractor versus an employee. So you're using the system to circumvent those protection mechanisms that may be in place.
Yeah, thank you. And you could certainly envision, I believe, where an employee could be convinced to become an independent contractor because they might save marginally on making CPP contributions and even delaying the paying of the tax. But a lot of the benefits that they would accrue from an employee would actually come afterwards. And so if you're not an employment expert, if you're not sophisticated, you may not know that by becoming an independent contractor, you no longer participate in the EI system. So if you get fired, like you said, you may not get protections such as common law damages, and you're not paying for CPP. So you could imagine a situation where someone is disabled. Now they don't get those disability benefits from CPP, or even they could work for 30 years and think that they're getting CPP, and now they're not. Could you see that situation playing out, sir?
My apologies. I pushed the button, but I think it automatically pushes for me when it's time for me to talk. Short answer is yes, right? I think the circumvention of those protection mechanisms. There's also the pressuring of, look, we have like we have an opportunity, a job opportunity for you, but you need to go and fill out these documents, incorporate. There's also the issue around up to $30,000. There is no need to incorporate as well. So as an individual, if you don't understand labor and employment law, you don't you don't get a contract, you don't go through it. With a contract, there's a lot of information. There's probationary provisions in there. There's provisions around vacation. There's also, most organizations have employee handbooks, which talk about the rights that an individual may have. All that kind of gets circumvented if you're an independent contractor.
And then just getting to the classification here, the CRA, amongst other government agencies, will classify, and really there are Supreme Court decisions, there's legislation about this, but it is common sense. If it looks like a business, acts like a business, it's probably a business. If in fact, I think of a traditional role as a truck driver working for a firm, someone who is scheduled by there, someone potentially is driving someone else's truck. If all those circumstances are met, my read of the legislation and of the Supreme Court decisions would be that person would likely be classified as an employee. Would you have a similar understanding?
I think it comes down to taking a common sense, reasonable approach in some of these cases. Kind of the common homage, right? If it looks like a duck and quacks, right? It's a duck, right? So if the individual is acting as a employee, if kind of the 6 items that I mentioned in my opening statement, if it's met, circumventing that and classifying them as an independent contractor, and there are legitimate situations for that, would not be appropriate.
Thank you very much.
I hope that answers your question.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Next, we will go to Mr. Kellaway. Mr. Kellaway, the floor is yours.
The audit that you did, is that something that you can provide to us? I know it's online, but if you could provide that to us, I think it's very valuable information as part of your testimony. That would be really important. Just had a couple of questions, more so around the timelines. That study was done, or the audit rather, was done in 2023?
It was done in 2019.
2019?
Yes.
Was there any previous, I'm just curious, was there any previous audit before that to juxtapose, to contrast and compare? Or was that basically fresh data from at that time?
That is a question I don't have on the top of my head. I've been the AG now for 2 years.
Okay.
So that would predate even 2019. But I do believe we've done driver licensing for regular drivers in 2024, and I believe that audit had been done as well before 2019.
So if that's something that can be sent to us
Sure.
In terms of the study, I think I would greatly appreciate it. I think it would be interesting. Just one quick question, and then I'll move on to Mr. Kotak. In terms of the 19 recommendations, and through this study, we have clearly, I think, delineated that there's provincial opportunities to strengthen things such as training and regulatory frameworks, and then there's a fair amount on the CRA side. But of the 19 recommendations, I'm curious, is there a breakdown between provincial and federal jurisdiction?
All of our recommendations would be addressed to the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario.
Okay.
So it was basically around their what's in their regulation authority. None of them would have been federal.
Of the province. Okay, thanks very much. Really appreciate it. Mr. Kotak, I'm going to shock you right now. I'm not a techie. It took me a while to understand what blockchain was. And 5 years ago, AI. Now we're learning a lot about it. But you talked about, in your testimony, you talked about fairness and integrity, and really focusing on those 2 pillars. So I'm just wondering, in terms of digital tools or platforms that can be implemented to better track employment practices in the trucking industry without breaching privacy, what are some of the things that you could advise us in using technology in respect to that balance, as you say?
Yeah, and again, technology is just a tool, right? It's there. It's not there to replace. It's there to aid. But there are certain AI and again with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and kind of the emergence of tech. There's a few things that can be done and tools that can be implemented. I would say right off the bat is pattern recognition. So I think if individuals are, for example, spinning up corporations or making filings, we can get pretty close to using pattern recognition to identify individuals that are misusing the system. As my friend mentioned, if you have this huge issue with limited resources, you need to know where to focus on, and that's it's kind of that flag to say let's go ahead and prioritize these files versus some of the other files. So that would be the pattern recognition component. I think something as small as having a AI based chatbot, like we're seeing this technology kind of come everywhere, where individuals, businesses included, right, are able to have a conversation with this bot to ask about what do I do in this situation.
I want to interrupt you, but when you say AI chatbot, can you explain that to people that are 55, like me? Like, what does that mean? Because I think it's important to drill down in terms of recommendations. What are they? What's that? If you could do that, that would be great.
Sure. A chat bot I apologize. A chat bot in general is, look, we all have search queries, right? We'll go online, we'll search for something. That's our input. It will get processed, and then there'll be an output being the result. It's not very natural. It's not a natural conversation. With technology now, you can have a very natural conversation with these with essentially an algorithm that can give you information that is trained on accurate information that is being inputted in by sources, in this case the government of Canada, the provinces as well, on what based on jurisdiction, what the individual's rights are, what access to additional resources, pointing them in the right place. Essentially, what you're trying to do is you're creating an avenue for an individual to go and get their questions answered in a safe manner. There's also, again, privacy aside, there's analytics as well that could be gleaned from it. What type of questions are people asking? How often are they asking those questions as well? Can we get down to particular jurisdictions? And I know my time is up there, but that would be a way to leverage the technology.
Okay. Thank you very much. And for Mr. Minton, in your opening testimony, you quoted a lot of different stats, and I might have missed it, sir. But do you have information that you can share based on the stats that you shared with us today? There was a lot of stats that you brought up in terms of crime and correlation between different aspects, cause and effect. Can you submit any just evidence to support your opening testimony? I'd really appreciate it. That's for you, sir, yes.
Well, the evidence, he was mentioning ChatGPT. You can go into a chat and you can find all the crimes and list of crimes and all of those things, and which, quite frankly, I did from my presentation, and you have copies of my original presentation, right. I believe you do, where I've spelled out all the different issues. But crime, we talked about safety, we talk about crime. These are all associated with a segment of our society. Sad to say, but we have to address those things as a society. And
yes,
I don't know.
I don't mean to interrupt you, sir, but if you could submit, there's a lot of stats and a lot of correlation that, quite frankly, I think as a committee we need to look into. So, like, basically, I'm looking to ask you to show your work in terms of everything that you sourced today, in terms of correlation between certain groups and certain crimes. I think it's important for us to be very clear in terms of your testimony, and I want to make sure that we dig down deep into your testimony.
Thank you.
And that, if you could submit that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minton, and we'll make sure that you know how to submit that to the committee.
First of all, in your work, obviously we're a federal transportation committee, and we are focusing on the changing landscape of trucking within Canada. And so I wanted to see if some of the views that you have seen in Ontario can be brought into our context of our committee's study. Is there any lessons learned you think from your organization's study of the MTO in Ontario that could be more broadly of interest to this committee?
I believe actually the lessons learned from our experience with Ministry of Ontario, with Transportation in Ontario, are probably something that could be utilized across the country. So how many inspections are being done? What is being inspected when it's happening? Is it just roadside on the highway, or is it within a municipality? Taking a look at some of the accident rates and the reasons for them, and certainly how do we test and train our drivers is something that would be systemic probably across Canada, just to make sure that that's happening. And also the inspection of the vehicles, making sure you do hit each of the commercial truck carriers. So 56% were not tested, and some of them had very high collision rates. So doing your testing based on, and inspections based on risks. So, seeing where those bad apples are and going in and inspecting them, and ensuring that they're doing the things they're supposed to do is really important. And then again, driving the Class A license versus the different classes, that's going to be different in every province, but do they have distinctions, and is the training appropriate for the type of vehicle that is being driven, and is that coming up with more at-fault accidents than not in a certain license class? So the data is there. You can analyze it. My friend here will tell you that you could take a look at the data and analyze it to see, how many collisions are there, what are the fatalities, what are the reasons for these fatalities, and then work your way backwards to what are you looking for in those inspections. So I think any province will have that jurisdiction to test, train, and inspect drivers and the vehicles, and to make sure that they have a good detailed inspection list and they're doing enough of them. Because that was our initial finding, is if they had actually continued at the level they were at 2014, they would have taken 10,000 vehicles off the road that were unsafe. And, so that's the proactive way to ensure that these fatalities and at-fault collisions and injuries do not occur.
So I think it's really interesting you focused on proactivity, because it does seem to me, and again, I don't expect you to draw on the federal because obviously your work is focused in Ontario, but it does seem to me that ESDC and CRA, and there's some major problems, particularly with the moratorium, but it does seem to be those are lagging indicators, so they're complaint-based or they are flagged after the fact. And it does seem that having more proactive inspection ahead of time in other ways would probably be helpful. What would you think? Does any of your evidence point to that?
Yes, the evidence, because the roadside inspections are random, we were able to take that information and extrapolate and say, if you kept doing as many as you had done, we'd have 10,000 less vehicles on the road that were unsafe. Getting back to what you said, there is very proactive ways of doing that, and also taking a look at how truck drivers are trained. What are the tests for each of the different classes, and what are the requirements that they go through to ensure that they are safe drivers that we're giving licenses to.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kotek, really briefly, it's been suggested to this committee that temporary foreign worker, those foreign nationals on permits, should not be allowed to get incorporated status. What is your thoughts on that?
I really don't have any thoughts on there. As of now, just about the simplicity of incorporation is kind of something that I've been focused on. But I don't have any comments on that one in particular.
If you do, please refer your thoughts to the committee. I know it's a quick question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Albus. Next, we have Mr. Gahir.
This is one of the areas where I get a lot of reports of problems with licensing in terms of, is the training module fully being followed? Are students paying attention? Are they fully immersified in that experience? Are licensing, essentially, is anyone paying for their license? I don't know how overblown this problem really is, but you hear about it on social media. I hear about it from folks that are in my riding of Mississauga Malton, that could there be potentially individuals that have paid to either skip courses or to skip their licensing, essentially paid for a license?
I can't speak to the report in progress because it does need to be tabled with my Parliament. But what I can say is that we did a Class G driver license and training audit in 2024, and we did find we had some mystery shoppers, I would call it, who took the courses and didn't have to do. I think it was out of 11. Out of 11 of the people that we put out to do a course, 4 of them were able to skip all of the road testing except for 1 hour of the time in the car. So there are players out there that are allowing people to basically buy the license and not do the work. So we found that with Class G licensing, and I wanted to dig into whether or not that's happening in commercial trucking, but I can't mention that at this point.
I look forward to the report and reading it. Your recommendations that you had in the other report, did any of them focus on education and awareness of, that could be provided potentially to help new truck drivers in terms of, what's an employee, what's an incorporated driver, what are the responsibilities under either model?
It was 2019, so it was before the pandemic. We didn't look into this whole issue that has been discussed quite widely with the committee, the Driver Inc. Model, whether incorporating or not. We focused more on the Ministry of Transportation's role in regulating drivers, and that's basically where we looked at the licensing and the inspections.
Did you find that there was an adequate level of education and ongoing training that the MTO engages in?
Well, when it comes to the into training the drivers, they certainly, with our other audit of the Class G, we found that there was inadequate surveillance, I guess is what you'd want to call it, around making sure that when people have a certificate, it's not just sign on the dotted line and here's your license.
In your opening testimony, you spoke about certain recommendations that were not implemented or not being followed. Can you speak a little bit? Do you know what they are?
So we in our 5-year follow-up, we really look at it at a very summary level. So I can't get into that level of detail. But I can say that some of the recommendations they have done, they've figured out how many roadside inspections they need to do, and they're working on the staff training plan, that sort of thing. But as far as the 14%, I had a feeling someone would ask me that, but we did not publicly disclose which ones those were.
Okay.
And I'm going to start off by reading a quote, Mr. Mitten, that I believe it's you, it's your quote. But it takes me to my first question. It says, "We're not asking for a handout, we're demanding a seat at the table. Canada's economy runs on wheels. If we lose access to our most critical market, we lose more than business, we lose influence. We've earned our place in North America's supply chain, now we need to defend it. Let's not wait for a solution, let's be the voice that drives one." And I believe that was you on cross-border trucking, sir. And I really like that quote, by the way. So obviously my riding is a riding of Essex, right next to the busiest international border crossing in North America. And I believe your firm actually was part of the company involved in the merger of IFS Transportation to RIMS Transport, which happens to be in my riding. So
very good.
We got something.
Very good company, sir.
There you go. That's great to know. My first question for you, sir, because it's a border community. So being on the busiest international border crossing in North America, next to my riding, I'm wondering if you could speak about to how Driver Inc. has affected cross-border trucking.
Well, I think it's generalities, but cross-border trucking, you need good drivers in the U.S. It doesn't take very much to cause an accident. I was thinking about today, if you drive 500 miles, there's going to be at least 2 or 3 occurrences where you need skilled people driving that truck. And you've got 80,000 pounds to worry about. So if you're in the U.S., you better have somebody who knows where they're going. They've been trained. They've been coached by a team driver. And so they know what they're doing. And I don't think that's that is happening on the other side of what I call the other side of the society, if you like.
Okay.
So if you're a Canadian driver in the U.S., you really don't want to have an accident. You get on to nuclear verdicts, you get into all kinds of things. But as some of the people here suggested the other day, all of a sudden the company names get changed. So it's another challenge for everybody.
Thank you, Mr.
And it's a reputation for Canada.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Back through you, Mr. Chair, back to Mr. Minton. So I got a couple of my constituents. One wrote to me that over 20 years ago, he's been in the business over 20 years, and he had to get out of the business because of lack of training with new drivers over the past decade. He said, "I'm scared to be on the road any longer." Another constituent, a fleet manager, wrote to me, said, "I'm a second-generation business owner. I'm not only concerned for my family's future, but all the families within Windsor, Essex, that we and other law-abiding carriers in our community employ. These are professional truck drivers who are scared to be on the road and are scared for their family's safety." I'm wondering if you could speak to how the Driver Inc. model puts compliant truck driving businesses at a severe disadvantage, and in turn have put Canadians at risk on the roads, including my constituents, who are professional truck drivers that are scared to be on the road. Specifically, what are the numbers and how are compliant truck driving businesses at a disadvantage?
Well, compliant truck drivers are at a disadvantage because of costs. They pay their wages, they pay benefits, and they remit income taxes to government. So the difference between a Driver Inc. company and what I call a legitimate company is about $45,000, and I think you'll find that in my report. I've outlined that and how I arrived at the numbers. That's a big number. It's a huge number. In the meantime, the legitimate guys spend more time training because they're responsible. And versus the other people who bring a driver in, they'll put them in a truck. They get through a minimum amount of training, as we've heard in HR people the other day. And if you have a minimal amount of training in a big rig, you're dangerous. You can't help but be dangerous. And it takes a lot of emphasis to drive a big rig. I came from a farm, and I appreciate what's happened. And what I did back then was another story. But you'd understand the differences between people who are trained and the people who are untrained, and then they're out on the road and they have to respond. And there's a big difference.
Thank you so much, Mr. Minton.